Hammond. I work for Colorado State University Extension out of Adams County, and today we're just going to do a little talk on how to save some water in your lawn while taking good care of it. As you come in, if you can just make sure you mute your video. You should all get muted automatically, but you can just make sure you mute your video. That would be awesome. So with these Zoom talks, I always have to start with the disclaimer that there have been some people who have gotten Zoom bombed and all that. You've probably read about it. So we're taking some precautions for that. So one of them is that you can't chat or anything like that. It's all kind of locked down. We'll open up the chat 5 minutes before the end of the talk to let you type in some questions, and I'll stay around afterwards and answer a bunch of questions at the end. If for some reason something does go wrong, we'll close the talk immediately and then try to restart it. So you can just click the same link you used to get here to rejoin if we're forced to close it because someone's acting silly. So, okay, that said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about Waterwise lawn care. I'm going to go into presentation mode, hopefully. Yep. So hopefully everyone can see that. So again, I know there's some people coming late. So I'm Eric Hammond. I work for CSU Extension out of Adams County. We're kind of the outreach arm of the university, and this is one of a series of talks we're doing on kind of topical landscape maintenance issues. And today we're going to talk about how to take care of your lawn to save as much water as possible while still having a good looking lawn. This little chart here is from the City of Colorado Springs Utility Department, and it kind of shows an idealized watering schedule throughout the summer, and how much water to apply. A ½ inch on the shoulders of the season, April and October when it's cooler, an inch during the spring and the late summer, early fall, and then 1.5 inches a week of water during the summer. So that's like a very basic representation of how much water your lawn needs. I'm going to talk more about how we do that, how we know how much we're putting out, and how we can make sure our lawn only needs that much and not more because it's under stress or something like that. So I always start like these Waterwise talks with a little bit of information about, why we care about conserving water, because I know there's a lot of people who are new to the state. So Colorado is a dry place, right? Especially the Front Range. We're in the rain shadow of the Rocky Mountains. We don't get a lot of moisture compared to a lot of other parts of the country and the world. This is a current as of the 16th, so pretty current drought map for the state. The kind of angrier the color is, the worse the drought is. You can see that the vast majority of the state is in drought this year. The northern Front Range, so Adams County, where I work, Boulder, Broomfield, Weld, and Larimer actually are doing pretty well, but any parts further south, you get into progressively worse drought. You've probably heard about all the fires burning in the southwest corner of the state right now. So we live in a dry place, so we should all be concerned about water and saving it. It's a limited resource. And as more people move here and potentially the climate changes, we're just gonna have to get more concerned about it. There are a lot of things you can do to conserve water. If this was a longer talk, I talk more about other of these main points, but you could use more xeriscape. What we're really going to talk about, though, is how to take better care of the landscapes we have and how to make sure we're applying the water effectively. And there's a lot of savings of water just in those two things. Even if you don't put in a bunch of xeric perennials or buffalo grass, just by taking better care of your landscape, there's a fair amount of water savings to be achieved. I like to always point out, too, that we're always very focused on the landscapes, but there's a lot of potential to save water indoors, too, and that's not what this talk is about, but you should talk to your local utility. They have programs to help you get more efficient toilets and showers and things like that, and all that is just as important as the outdoor stuff. So, hot tip number one, bluegrass if you're not aware, bluegrass lawns are the vast majority of the lawns along the Front Range. Probably 95% plus of the lawns are bluegrass. So if you don't know what you have, odds are it's bluegrass. Bluegrass lawns get a little bit bad rep for water use, but really for a lot of the things that we want to use our lawns for, kids playing on, pets, walking on without shoes, things like that, bluegrass is actually a really good choice. And it's more drought tolerant than people give it credit for. However, even though bluegrass is great, if there's an area, and even that's what I'm going to talk about today is how to take care of your bluegrass. If there's an area of turf you don't use for playing or for pets or for kids, you might consider replacing it with a lower water use alternative. And that's a whole nother talk. We had a talk on that earlier in the year, but it's something you might want to consider. It's something your local extension office can help you out with if you have questions about how to do it. But for the areas of your yard that you are going to want to have as bluegrass, the key is to water them effectively. And how to water effectively, it depends on the type of plant you're dealing with. In our case, we're really talking about turf. Your soil, is it sandy? Is it clayey? That's going to determine how you water. I'll get more into that in a second. The time of year. So when the weather's cooler or when it's raining, we obviously water much less. We should be watering anyways, much less than we do during the heat of the summer or during dry periods. So all those things need to factor in when you're watering effectively. In terms of precipitation, this is the precipitation chart. The blue bars are precipitation in terms of in inches. And this is for Brighton, but it would be very similar for other parts of the Front Range. You can see we get a lot of our moisture in the spring, April, May, a little drier, usually midsummer. Sometimes we get monsoons if we're lucky in August. So, you know, and temperature matters too. You can see temperatures now, you wouldn't know it this spring, it's been so hot the last 2 weeks, but you know, it's usually a little cooler in the spring, and then it, you know, heats up into July and August and cools down again in the fall. That's basic stuff. I probably didn't tell you that, but this determines our watering schedule. So we're going to water less in the spring, and because it's cooler and it's generally raining more here, and then usually less in the fall because it's cooler as well. So the key for that, you taking care of your lawn, is to make sure that these little controllers we all have that run our sprinkler systems are being adjusted to take that into account. And that can happen a lot of ways. One, you know, like the one I have is old school. I just have to manually adjust it. So I just have to, you know, every once in a while go in there and turn the times up as the weather heats, the watering times up as the weather heats up, and turn them back down as the weather cools down. There's a lot of water savings to be had just from doing that. And a lot of us don't do a super good job with that, right? We set it for the summer and forget it. And that means that we're probably, you know, watering for the highest, we're probably setting it for the highest demand period and probably overwatering during the spring and the fall. So adjusting your timer can take care of that. And if you don't want to do it personally or you're not comfortable, these days they make all sorts of fancy controllers that either are linked to a weather station on your house or more commonly linked to your home Wi-Fi network. And they pull weather data off the internet and set your irrigation schedule just according to what the temperature is from a local weather station. And you can find those all over the place now. It's a much more common technology than it used to be. And it might be worth investing in if you know in your busy life you're not going to be able to just change the controller weekly, or you're not going to remember to. So how much water does bluegrass turf actually need? You know, all that aside, it can vary quite a bit. If your bluegrass has been poorly taken care of, it's not well rooted. During the heat of the summer, it could need 2.5 inches of water a week. On the other hand, if it's well cared for, deeply rooted, properly maintained, it could be significantly less, as little as 1.5 inches a week, depending how hot it is. I find that number, like that, these inches, giving the irrigation needs in inches kind of throws people off. It's when you think of that, all that means is enough water to cover your lawn, you know, 1.5 inches in this case, deep in water. It needs that, you know, a week. If you want to know how many gallons that is, I've wait, what does that mean? Yeah. I've done the math for you. How much water is in an inch? An inch of water is about 0.6 gallons of water per square foot. And there's the math there if you don't trust me. If you scale that up, what that means, that's about 325-ish gallons of water per 625 gallons of water per 1,000 square feet to apply an inch of water. And then you scale it up again to get the 1.5 inches the lawn might need. And so you're timesing it by 1.5. And that means, so for 1,000 square feet of lawn, the bottom line is 1.5 inches of water for 1,000 square feet of lawn is about 935 gallons of water a week. Now, obviously, you probably don't have a flow meter to measure that, but just in case you were interested in how much water it actually is, if you have 1,000 square feet of turf, that's about what it comes out to. A much more simpler way to think about this is maybe in terms of how we apply it. So again, we're going to go back to this chart that from the City of Colorado Springs utilities, because I think it's pretty, it's very cut and dry and straightforward. So you can see that, in the shoulders of the season in April and October, when it's cooler, we maybe think the lawn needs a ½ inch of water a week just on average. And we're going to apply that in one irrigation. We'll apply all of that ½ inch. So I should start over. So this chart assumes that every time you irrigate, you're applying a ½ inch of water. So you irrigate once and apply ½ inch of water in the shoulders of the season. When it gets a little warmer in the later part of the spring, you'd irrigate twice, still applying a ½ inch each time for a total of 1 inch a week. And then during the very hottest part of the summer, starting right about now, you'd apply that full 1.5 inches, and you would do 3 irrigations to apply it. So that seems pretty straightforward, except for the fact it's like, how much water do I know? How long does it take me how long does it take me leaving my system on to apply that ½ inch of water? Once you know that, it's pretty simple. So that's kind of the tricky part. So let's talk just a little bit about how we figure that out and the differences in some sprinkler systems and how quickly they put water out. So hang on a second here. My third hot tip is that when you water, you generally want to apply as much water as you can, as infrequently as possible. So water as deeply as possible and as infrequently as possible. You want to fill up that soil profile to as deep a depth as you can, and then use it as a big reservoir to let the turf pull water out of. When you water deeply and infrequently, you get deeper rooted turf, which is more drought resistant, so it'll better tolerate those hot, dry periods later in the year. And this is just a little illustration that shows you how that works. If you're watering every day for a little bit of time, you're only wetting the top ½ inch of soil, all the grass roots are going to be in that top ½ inch of soil. And so you'll have to be watering all the time, because even though eventually, like, it may rain and there may be water deeper, the grass won't have roots down there to pick it up. So deep, infrequent watering is our goal. So we want to apply, we want to generally follow that schedule I just showed you. But the other way of thinking about it is we want to water as infrequently as we can and as deeply as we can. And for a lot of us along the Front Range who have clayey soils, that means we might want to consider what's called cycle and soak irrigation, which means that we water, we turn our sprinkler system on for a period of time, usually until we see water running off, meaning there's more water being applied than the soil can soak up. And then we turn the system off for 30 to 60 minutes, and then we turn it on again, so to further irrigate. And then maybe we have to even do a third cycle to really get the water in there deep. Our clay soils accept water so slowly that our sprinklers may apply it too quickly for the soil to absorb all that water. And so by doing this on, off, cycle and soak routine, we're able to irrigate more deeply and get more deeply rooted turf. So if you're not doing cycle and soak, it's something to think about. Most modern irrigation timers have settings for cycle and soak. If you have an older timer, it may not do it. You may have to either do it manually or just accept that you can't do it easily. Okay, so yeah, that's great, Eric, but how long should I set my system for? Well, it depends. It depends, one, on the type of sprinkler head you have. So if you have pop-up heads like this that spray in all directions, they don't oscillate back and forth, they spray in just one, either a 360 or 180 or whatever direction they spray continually in that direction, not moving back and forth, you're probably going to have a lot shorter run times because they have a very high flow rate. They put out 1 to 2 inches of water an hour, depending on system design and the type of head you have on them. These sort of sprinklers are designed to operate at a fairly low PSI, 15 to 35 PSI. So that's pressure in the water line. Fun fact, along the Front Range, a lot of our water comes between 50 and 75 PSI. So what that leads to with these is oftentimes they end up misting and the water blows away with the wind when they're operating at too high pressure. This is the most probably simple type of sprinkler head you can get. It just has a body that screws onto a threaded fitting underneath the ground, a pop-up riser that comes out of it with a nozzle on the top. The nozzles come in all different types, all different spray patterns, and usually they just screw on and off the top of the riser. Don't let anyone intimidate you about this. It's really easy. If you can screw things together, you can handle pop-up sprinklers and replacing nozzles and replacing heads. So this is sometimes the issue. So we have to use shorter run times with these because they put out water really fast. And because they put out water really fast, if you have this sort of system, you really want to be thinking about cycle and soak. Like it comes on, your system comes on for 10 to 12 minutes and then is off for an hour and then back on for 10 to 12 minutes, and then off for an hour, maybe even on again, depending on your system. They oftentimes, you'll see them looking like this parking lot island here, just misting like this because there's too much pressure in most of our systems here along the Front Range. In this case, you want to either think about replacing the heads with a different sort called MP rotators that I'll talk about here in a second, or you want to put a pressure reducer in the line. You can buy one at the any of the big hardware stores. So those are pop-up spray heads. The other most really sort of common type of head is a rotary head. So these are the ones that kind of tick back and forth. They put out water much more slowly, 0.3 to 0.8 inches of water an hour. They don't just operate at higher pressure, they need higher pressure because they throw the water further. So they're good for larger areas because they have longer throw radiuses, 35 feet or more in some cases. You may not need to use cycle and soak with these sort of systems, depending on your soil and how quickly the system is designed, because they put out water more slowly. But if you're seeing runoff really quickly, cycle and soak still might be a good idea. Let that water get in a little further. The other thing about these sorts of, and this is true for all sprinkler heads, but particularly true for these rotary heads, is that they need to be irrigating to their next head. So this head here in the picture needs to spray to this head and vice versa to get good coverage, because they don't irrigate as uniformly as some other types of sprinklers. So, again, if you're trying to put out a half inch of water, remember these will put out 0.3 to 0.8 inch in an hour. So that means you're going to be running anywhere from, have them on anywhere from like 40 minutes to longer to get that half inch per irrigation. Okay. The final type I'm going to talk about is a real tip I think that you might be able to take home. And this is a newer type of pop-up head, which is called an MP rotator. These are kind of a hybrid between rotary heads and pop-up heads. They put out water in these streams, and these streams oscillate. So you can't see in this picture, but they move from left to right. So they've got big droplets, they're less likely to blow in the wind, and they put out water very slowly, normally about 0.4 inches of water in an hour. And because they put out water very slowly, it lets the soil absorb all the water. There's less water lost to runoff. There's less water lost into the air than pop-up sprinklers, like blowing away in the wind. So that makes them very efficient. You can oftentimes lower your water bill just by installing these sort of heads. They operate at low pressure, just like standard pop-up heads. They're good for smaller spaces. They struggle sometimes, or you need to have a lot of heads anyways for larger landscapes. You may or may not use cycle and soak with them. Probably not, depending on your soil type, because they water so slowly. It's really important to have head-to-head coverage and make sure they're properly adjusted. And then the final thing about this is that, and I have this picture of the one here so you can see it, is that they are threaded just like your spray nozzles. And so usually you can just unscrew your old pop-up spray nozzle and screw in one of these, and then you're on MP rotator heads. It's really easy. Again, if you can screw a cap onto a jar, you can change out your sprinkler head from pop-ups to MP rotators. You just have to look at the brand and figure out whether your riser is male or female threaded, because different brands are different. You need to buy heads that match. If your riser is male, you need to make sure you're buying female heads and vice versa. That's the only trick about that. So I'd really recommend switching to these. They used to be really expensive. Now you can buy them at any of the hardware stores. I think you can get 3 of them for like $5 to $8 or something like that. So very affordable. And they're going to save you water just doing that. So there's all these different head types out there, and you can be successful with either of them as long as you adjust your system appropriately. But one thing you don't want to be doing is mixing and matching the types, which is what's going on in this picture. So you can see these dry areas in kind of a circular pattern in this lawn. And then you see the good-looking grass in the middle. And in the middle of that good-looking grass, you have a pop-up head that's spraying in all directions at once. So it sprays this whole 360-degree area around it. On the same zone, on the edge of the yards, they have rotators. So in the time that this is on, if it's on for say 40 minutes, this pop-up head puts water out maybe 30 to 50% faster than the rotary heads on the outside. So we're getting dry areas on the outside where the rotary heads are watering, and green area in the center where the pop-up spray is watering. So mixing and matching heads can lead to issues with having dry areas because these heads put out water at different rates. I already mentioned this, but just so you can visualize it, another really important thing in terms of watering efficiently is making sure that you have good head-to-head coverage. So each sprinkler head spraying to its neighbors. So there's no weak spots in the coverage. And this is important for conservation because if there's weak spots in the coverage, then what ends up happening is that you end up running the whole system more to get those weak spots watered more, and end up overwatering the rest of the lawn and thus wasting water. So it's just kind of a simple thing that can help you save some water. It's just making sure the heads are lined out with head-to-head coverage. A few other tips for sprinkler system design. Make sure that your zones on your sprinkler system are according to water use, right? Like all your bluegrass should be on one zone. You shouldn't have a zone that's like a xeric garden and bluegrass, or you'll end up overwatering the xeric garden. Again, don't mix and match head types. Also, it's nice to have your zones be uniform in terms of exposure. So all the really sunny areas are on the same zone and the shady areas are on a different zone. So again, you're not overwatering a shady area trying to keep up with the sunny area. Remember that your yard is going to change over time as hopefully trees mature, etc., and your system will have to change over time to match, to go along with it. Sometimes a head will get blocked by a shrub that grows up. Sometimes an area that was sunny will get shady, and you just got, so your sprinkler system needs to evolve to meet those challenges too, if you want to stay efficient. Bad sprinkler system design leads to dry spots in the lawn, leads to overwatering. So here you can see the edge of a lawn that's not getting watered. They're running the system more and more, trying to get rid of these dry spots and overwatering up here. And that's not going to fix the dry spot over here because the sprinkler doesn't spray it. Here, there's not good head-to-head coverage. So there's a dry spot between them. No amount of watering is going to fix that. It's never going to spray that dry spot. If the sprinklers settle or are too high or too low, they will not water uniformly. So here we have a sprinkler blight, right? The sprinkler's too low and a bunch of the water is being caught right by the sprinkler, leading to a dry area near the sprinkler. And again, you can water all you want. It's not going to fix that. Same thing here. You can see the sprinkler is settled, is now too low, and a bunch of the water is being caught by the grass. In this case, you'd have to, dig a little hole around the sprinkler, remove the sprinkler, put a taller riser in under the sprinkler. Again, it's all just threaded, all just screws together. So screw in a taller riser, screw the sprinkler and the riser back into the sprinkler line, and then it would be higher. Heads that are tilted, right? So here, this is both pictures illustrate the same thing. The head is tilted forward. All sprinklers are designed to operate straight, plumb, and vertical. If they're tilted anyway, they will not water uniformly. So in this case, the sprinkler is tilted down, and so it's not watering as far as it's supposed to, and you're getting a dry spot. And you can see they're overwatering close to the sprinkler, trying to get this further dry spot, take care of this dry spot, but the sprinkler is not watering it. And again, just more examples. These heads have become clogged over time, so they're not throwing as far as they used to, and you're getting dry spots in between them. Just need to change out the sprinkler heads. More watering won't fix it. Obviously, this isn't very good for water conservation, right? This is just a very poorly designed system, the wrong type of heads, and they're poorly adjusted, mostly watering streets and sidewalks. You definitely want to have your sprinkler heads along the edge of those sidewalks, spraying inward. So if you have a poor design for your sprinkler system, it's going to just waste water, and there's really no fix for it other than fixing the design flaws in the sprinkler system. Broken heads, same thing. You can lose, a whole week's worth of watering and a couple minutes worth of water from a broken head like this. If you have one, get it fixed or get someone to fix it. You can also save water by irrigating at the right time of day. So in the early morning, late evening, when it's generally less windy. So that's the main thing. People talk about heat and all that, and that's maybe somewhat true, but most of our water savings comes from the calmer conditions in the evening and morning, and water not being blown where we don't want it. Okay, so you're probably going, Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, sorry guys, technical difficulties there for a second. So all that preamble aside, you're probably wondering, so how long should I set my system? You know, we've kind of been dancing around it here. Um, the only way to know for your system with all its different probably design quirks and maybe different sort of heads it has and all that is to put out some catch cans and then run the system and see how much water is out. So this is a very formal catch can. It's got inches of water labeled on it. You'd put a couple of these out in your yard, run the system for a set number of time, like say 30 minutes, see how much water is in the cup, and then you know approximately how much water you put out in that 30 minutes. And then you can adjust, you can scale that to make sure that you're irrigating an appropriate amount. If you don't want to get fancy catch cups like this, you can get any flat-bottomed, flat-sided container like a yogurt container or a flat-bottomed, flat-sided Tupperware and put them out in the yard. As long as they're all the same container, you should be okay. And then you can just measure the depth in those with a ruler to get your, after you've irrigated, to get how much water your system is putting out. And that's really the only way to know. So, you know, if you put it out there for 30 minutes and a half inch of water is in the cup, that's perfect. You know that if you run the system for 30 minutes, you put out that half inch. So you're going to irrigate 30 minutes, either once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week, depending on the season, to get that, you know, inch or half inch to inch and a half of water, again, depending on the weather, etc. So the final part of this talk, and I know I'm up against it time-wise, is I want to talk about a few things you can do maintaining your turf to make it use less water, because well-cared turf needs less water. This is me like mowing, fertilization, stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure that having a fancy lawnmower makes your lawn look better. So that's tip number 1. That aside, if you're maintaining your grass, the first thing you have to decide is what quality, how am I going to use it and what quality do I want? Because if you're able to accept a little lower quality lawn, you can save a lot on inputs, right? We're not all trying to maintain Invesco field or Coors field or something like that, right? We're also probably all not trying to maintain a natural looking area, although if you are, that takes a lot less input as well, right? So, you know, usually for most of us, we're somewhere between the lawn, the Coors field over here on the left and this kind of like average to a little below average looking lawn on the right. For if this is an okay lawn for you, it's an okay lawn for you, right? So it's just a little bit dependent on personal preference. So I'm going to talk a little bit about here at the very end of the talk about species and varieties for the Front Range. Particularly, I'm going to talk about buffalo grass. If you decide you don't want to go with, if you want to maybe really save a bunch of water, and I'll talk a little buffalo grass in the end, but mostly along the Front Range, we're talking about maintaining bluegrass. A big thing you can do to reduce your bluegrass's water use is to mow it to at a higher height. Generally, in Colorado, somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 inches should be the height of the grass after you mow it. You also don't want to cut off more than about 1/3 of the height in any one cutting. So, you know, letting it grow to 3.5 and cutting to 2.5, or letting it grow to 4 and cutting it to 3 inches in height are, you know, that's a pretty good setting. The longer the more of the blade of the grass you leave, the more energy the grass has, the more blade is there to do photosynthesis. So the more energy the grass has to grow roots, and the more drought tolerant it'll be. So you want to, you know, for most of us, this means just mowing your lawn with the mower on the highest or second to highest setting, and mowing it weekly during the heat of the summer, and maybe a little more than weekly, maybe every 5 days or so during the spring or fall when bluegrass lawns are growing more rapidly. Just that one simple thing can save you a bunch of water, actually. Taller grass also means there's less evaporation from the soil surface, so you can conserve water that way as well. I already talked about irrigation. I don't want to dwell too deeply on it here at the moment, but as I said, just the bullet points. Water as deeply, as infrequently as possible. If water is running off your turf like it is onto the sidewalk, you are watering too long. That probably means you need to shorten your times and maybe think about cyclone soak. That's water that's just going in the storm drain. It's just being lost. It drives me crazy when I see it. You also could consider, as I said, cyclone soak or switching to those MP rotator heads. That will save you a lot of water. Really easy, practical thing you can do. Water in the mornings and evenings, like I talked about, can also conserve water. and making sure your system is well designed. I already talked about that. I'm not going to get into it more, but it's all part of maintenance. So I'm just circling back around to it one more time. Here's a really formal catch can test to make sure you're applying evenly. You can see the cups are put out. You don't maybe need this many to do it on your own, but you do want to put out, a decent amount of cups to check your system and make sure it's watering evenly, and see how much water is getting put out. If you want to have a formal test done like this, a lot of the Northern Front Range utilities partner with the Center for Resource Conservation to offer free or reduced cost sprinkler system evaluations. Just contact your utility provider and see if they have that program, and see if there's still spots available. And you should do that sooner rather than later. They oftentimes kind of sell out of the number of tests they've contracted with the Center for Resource Conservation to do. So you want to get on that early if possible. Okay, so again, how much, right? So, it's going to be dependent, and we've already talked about it. What I want to focus on in the slide, I already talked about a lot of this, is that how much depends on how your lawn's cared for. If your lawn has been pretty poorly cared for, you may find that you're going to have to put out significantly more than that 1.5 inches a week when the weather gets hot, maybe closer to 2.5. But what I would encourage you to do is start to throttle it back to let the grass adapt to the different watering conditions. So maybe if you're watering 6 days or 7 days a week, cut it back to 5. And then in a month, cut it back to 4. And then maybe next year, shoot for the 3, right? It's going to be a transition to get your grass to, on the proper watering if it has not been watered properly. The other thing I haven't talked about is soil texture. If you have a clayey soil, that's going to mean that you can water with more water as long as you're watering slowly, less often. If you're on a sandy soil, though, you're going to have to water more frequently because sandy soil drains so rapidly. We've all been to the beach, so water moves through sand. You're going to have to water a lot more often if you have sandy soil. Maybe instead of 3, it's 4 or 5 times a week on sandy soil. The big thing, though, is to pay attention. If you're not paying attention to how your lawn is being irrigated on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you're probably missing water savings. A challenge I have for all of you is to turn off your timer and operate your systems manually for a couple of weeks and really learn how long your yard can go without water before it starts looking stressed. And if you're doing that, this is the key. So you irrigate and then you wait a day, 2, 3 days. And when you see your lawn start doing this footprinting, where you see footprints across, footprints stay on the lawn after you walk across it, that means that is the night to water your lawn. The lawn is just a little drought stressed. You're encouraging deeper rooting, and it's time to water again. So I would challenge you all to maybe try for just for a week or two to water your lawn manually and get a feel for how long your lawn can really go between irrigations, how long before this footprinting starts, so you can kind of get a feel for your lawn and set your timer appropriately in the future. Very briefly, I just want to talk about fertility. I'm going to skip through because I know I'm out of time. For bluegrass lawns, the most important fertilizations are fall and spring. Fall is probably the most. If you're fertilizing one time a year, it should be in the fall for a bluegrass lawn in Colorado. Fall fertilization is mostly put by the plant into root growth, and so it leads to a more drought-resilient lawn the next year. A spring fertilization is also fine. We do not recommend fertilizing during the hot part of the year for bluegrass. Bluegrass is a cool season grass. During the summer, if you fertilize, all you're going to get is a bunch of top growth, which needs a lot more irrigation. So pretty much from about now until the heat breaks in the middle of August, we don't really recommend fertilizing bluegrass lawns here in Colorado, unless you're trying to maintain like Coors Field or something like that. I'll send this chart out with the handout for the week, but this just kind of gives our fertilization recommendations. Essentially, we're saying 2.5 to 3, more, 2.5 pounds of nitrogen or more per year, depending on the quality of lawn you're trying to maintain. You can split the application, the spring and fall applications, to make 4 applications, or if you don't want the perfect quality lawn, you can do them in one application in the spring and fall. I just do one application personally because, again, I'm okay with a little lower quality lawn. So we have high maintenance bluegrass, low maintenance bluegrass here, and then some other types of lawn, other types of turf you might grow along the Front Range as well. So a few other minor things. Leaving the clippings on your lawn is okay. It'll return some nutrients to the soil. You'll need to fertilize less if you're doing that. Leaving the clippings does not lead to thatch accumulating. Thatch accumulation occurs more commonly with some species of grass. And then again, maybe because you're overwatering, over-fertilizing, or underwatering, under-fertilizing could lead to a thatch buildup as well, but leaving the clippings does not lead to it. So finally, the most important lawn practice along the Front Range, if according to our turf guru on campus, is core aeration. This is where they pull those plugs out. We'd recommend you ideally do this in the spring and the fall, and that when they do it, you have them really do more than one pass of the lawn to really make Swiss cheese out of it. By pulling all those cores out, we allow more air into the soil, which leads to better root growth, and we allow for faster infiltration of water because there's a lot more surface area in all those little holes than there was when there were no holes for water to be absorbed into the soil. So, so that, you know, if you, those are just some tips. All those things, taking care of your grass well will allow it to use less water. If you're done with your bluegrass and want to move on, our very best option here along the Front Range is probably to replace your cool season bluegrass with a warm season grass. Usually that's buffalo grass or buffalo grass blue grama mixes. If you have questions about installing buffalo grass, please give me a call. I'm happy to talk you through it. It has a number of advantages and disadvantages. Just be aware that it is not nearly as tolerant of wear and tear as bluegrass. If you have pets, playing kids, buffalo grass is not for you. Also, it really does like full sun. So if you have a shady yard, again, buffalo grass is probably not your thing. But under the right conditions, it can look pretty good. Here's a pretty good buffalo grass lawn in Westminster. I don't know anything about this. It's going to use a lot less water than bluegrass. But again, this couple had no kids, no pets. They're not putting a lot of traffic on it. So just something to keep in mind. So a couple other shots of buffalo grass. This is buffalo blue grama mix, just so you know what that might look like if it's something you want to pursue. Again, pure buffalo grass. This one's mowed a little shorter. I don't know what that picture is. So anyway, so I went about 5 minutes over. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to bring up the chat. If you have any questions, feel about reducing water in your lawn or just lawn care in general, I'm happy to try to answer them. So I've lost my chat. Here it is, chat. Okay, so what causes turf to go to seed is one question I got. Happens in patches. So it's usually environmental factors, right? Usually in the late spring, most cool season grasses try to put seed on just as a response to temperature and area. So if you're seeing a patch that's trying to go to seed, it may be a patch that's a little bit more moist. It may be a patch that's just a different variety that's blown in. But usually it's environmentally triggered. So temperature, day length, also watering can play a factor in that too. Gary asks, what's good for getting a deeper green grass without making it grow more? So you can make, if you're, that's somewhat subjective. Generally, a darker green grass will be a well-fertilized grass. So it's going to make sure that you're getting your good fall nitrogen application will lead to a darker green grass the next year. So without like encouraging a bunch of top growth, with a midsummer fertilization. If the grass is light green, it could be that you have a micronutrient deficiency like iron. So applying an iron fertilizer might help with that. Making sure you have enough phosphorus and potassium in your soil also could play into that. But I would really recommend getting a soil test if you're very concerned about that. Because a lot of our Front Range soils have a lot of phosphorus and potassium anyway. So I'd want to make sure that you have a deficiency before applying a lot of phosphorus or potassium fertilizer. But again, iron or a fall nitrogen fertilization should get your grass a darker green. Okay. Oh, Cassie already answered those questions. Revive, is that Revive? Yeah. So Barbara, hey Barbara, wants to know about Revive, the product Revive. So Revive is a surfactant. So it is a product that is essentially a little bit like a soap. It makes water flow better, if that makes sense. It makes water wetter, bead less. There's no magic in Revive. it can allow water to infiltrate compacted clay soil slightly more quickly. You can achieve the same results probably by using cycle and soak irrigation. Again, deeper irrigation. So you water slowly and let the water sink in, or Revive may allow the water to penetrate more quickly. Revive can also be really useful, and other surfactants, I should say, can also be really useful if you have like areas that have a lot of old tree roots where water is no longer moving into the soil very quickly. It can help them penetrate those waxy the waxy fungi that are decomposing the roots. Also, if you have a lot of thatch, Revive can also help move water through that thatch. There's no magic in it though. Um, it can help, especially if you have like a sprinkler system that puts out water really fast. Jana wants to know, she's aerated for the last several years, but then the lawn becomes lumpy and uneven. What do I do to maintain a comfortable walking evenness? That's a really tough one, Jana. Bumpy lawns they're going to happen. The aeration might make it worse. Also, maintenance tasks like lawn mowing can make it worse, right? The wheels of the lawnmower press it down. Just the natural setting of the soil leads to lumpy lawns. We get this question a lot, and there's not a good way to deal with lumpy lawns. Earthworms can make them lumpy over time too. I don't have a super good way to prevent, the soil from settling or shifting or earthworms from, moving it. If you want to spend money and get really fancy, they can, moisten the soil and roll it to make it more even every so often. Or in some cases, they can bring in like little bits of fill soil, but those are pretty high dollar, high maintenance things. So I wish I had a good solution for that, but soil settles. It's just what happens, unfortunately. Um, will yogurt cups work catch cans? So I guess it would depend on the yogurt cup, less. So if they are, is you want them to pretty much have a flat bottom and flat side. If the cups have a curved side, then your measurement with the ruler won't be correct for the amount of water, right? Because it won't be a true inch because of the change in diameter of the cup. So I would recommend trying to maybe for a week buy a type of yogurt container that is flat bottoms and flat sides. Or maybe look at if you have some Tupperwares that have flat bottoms and flat sides lying around, those will work too. If the sides aren't flat, they won't work real well. John asks, what is the best way to adjust the spray direction for pop-up heads? So that really depends. Some of the heads have a screw on the top and they're like variable direction, so you can adjust them with the screw. You just have to kind of play with it to see which way makes it broader, wider, and which way makes it narrower. If they're not adjustable pattern, essentially you're going to want to be turning the body of the sprinkler to get it correct. So if it's just like turning it like 10 degrees, you're going to want to grip the body of the sprinkler if you can, and turn it. You also may be able to adjust the nozzle left or right, depending if it's like loose or tight, and whether you need to turn it left or right. I wouldn't generally recommend loosening the nozzle, but if you can tighten it and that's in the correct direction to fix your problem, that's fine. Otherwise, I'd recommend adjusting the body of the sprinkler. So you might have to dig a little soil away to get a grip on the body to turn it. But again, they all should be just threaded, so you should be able to get a grip on it and just turn the whole body of the sprinkler. That would be the way I would recommend doing it. Hopefully that answers everyone's questions. I don't see a lot here. It's a little bit smaller group today. Thank you all for tuning in. I will send out a handout to everybody that talks about some of this stuff here in the next few days, and a link to the video, closed caption recording of the talk. Dan Wolf is getting in a link there. That Kokoraz is for a network of self-reported rain gauges to help keep track of moisture. It's kind of a cool project. Click on it and check it out if you want to get involved with it. It's a fun project, citizen science project to get involved with. Excuse me. Gary, how much stress can the nozzle head take while trying to straighten it? As long as you don't like bend it left or right and just twist it, it can take a fair amount. But again, as long as you're grabbing it by the head, if you're grabbing it by the riser, there's more of a chance you can spin the risers oftentimes, but those are much more fragile. You could do more damage to the mechanism. uh, by doing that. So as long as you're holding it by the body of the sprinkler, the part that's down in the ground or right at the surface, it can take a fair amount of stress. Older sprinklers that are more like oxidized, they might be at higher risk of breaking. Okay, well, thanks everybody. You'll get a handout from me here in the next couple days, hopefully. Everyone has a great weekend, enjoys the cooler weather, and hopefully we see you all at future talks. Thanks.